In Sebastian Iloque's 1967 recollection, we encounter more than a personal homecoming story. We find a revealing window into the fractured civic identity of the Vietnam era. His account of returning from combat, wounded and in uniform, only to be deliberately ignored at a train station lunch counter, captures a profound moment of cultural rupture. This moment reflects the breakdown of a long-standing social contract in which military service was honored as a civic virtue, and soldiers were embraced by the society they served. During the Vietnam War, however, that contract began to collapse. Growing public disillusionment with the U.S. involvement in Southeast Asia led some Americans to conflate the war itself with the individuals tasked with fighting it. Iroquois' experience crystallizes this shift, illustrating how soldiers, especially draftees, found themselves not as heroes, but as controversial symbols of an unpopular conflict. His story thus embodies the broader tension between individual sacrifice and national recognition in a deeply polarized America. Unlike today's widespread support the troops ethos, Iroquois' experience reveals a time when the American public did not or would not distinguish between war policy and the individuals who carried it out. He and his fellow draftees, wounded in service, entered a civilian world where their uniforms no longer symbolized sacrifice but complicity. This tension sits at the core of Iroquois' emotional arc, as he writes, "We accepted our fate without question," identifying himself as part of a centuries-old tradition of dutiful service. There's no irony in his tone here. He believes this. For Iroquois, being drafted is not a burden, but a link in a democratic chain of defense, and that belief structures his self-conception. But the moral logic of the battlefield does not survive the transition back into civilian life. The same uniform that affirmed identity and purpose in Vietnam becomes at home a source of suspicion. The battlefield injury becomes not just a physical wound, but a social one, deepened by the public's refusal to reconcile the soldier's sacrifice with its protest of war. Iroquois' reflection helps us understand how the Vietnam War came home in a different way than prior conflicts. His disorientation upon return was not only geographic or emotional, it was cultural. Unlike veterans of World War II, who were celebrated upon return, Iroquois steps into a country that no longer recognizes its soldiers as agents of national good. As he puts it, the sudden reversal from sacred duty to object of revulsion was difficult to grasp. This is particularly significant because Iroquois was not a volunteer. He was drafted, fulfilling a duty imposed by the state. By 1967, however, the draft had become deeply controversial, widely viewed as unjust and disproportionately affecting working class and minority men. Iroquois' experience thus serves as a case study in the alienation of the drafted soldier, caught between the obligation to serve and a society that increasingly repudiated both the war and those who fought it. Embedded in Iroquois' recollection is an unmistakable aesthetic of trauma. He offers vivid, unflinching sensory details. Vietnamese mud with its like Vietnamese mud with its uniquely pungent smell, boots soaked through and socks rotting away, and a body marked by cast and colostomy. These descriptions ground the reader in physical realities of war, yet they are not framed as complaints. Instead, Iroquois normalizes the discomfort and danger, writing, "The danger and the objectionable conditions were not a source of regret." His acceptance reflects the internalization of duty and the expectation of sacrifice. But the deeper trauma, the one that lingers, is not physical. It surfaces unexpectedly in the quiet, civilian setting of a train station lunch counter. There, the silence of the waitress who deliberately refuses to serve two wounded soldiers in uniform speaks volumes. Iroquois' experience sheds light on the complex emotional and social aftermath that many Vietnam veterans faced, an aftermath that did not end with the battlefield but continued in the form of alienation, neglect, and misunderstanding upon returning home. His story helps explain why. In the years following the war, Vietnam veterans increasingly organized themselves into advocacy groups, such as the Vietnam Veterans of America, seeking recognition for their service, adequate medical care, and support for the invisible wounds they carried. These efforts were instrumental in pushing for the formal recognition of post-traumatic stress disorder as a diagnosable mental health condition by the American Psychiatric Association, a shift that fundamentally changed how the country approached the psychological toll of war. In many ways, Iroquois is not offering a political critique of the war, but his story is political in its implications. It reminds us that wars are not only fought overseas, they are also negotiated at home, in diners and train stations, in attitudes and silences. Veterans do not return to the world, they return to a society that may or may not be ready to receive them. And in 1967, that society was not.